Chapter 1. The Endless Night. For centuries, Vincent had walked the cobbled streets of London, his footsteps echoing through the ages. A vampire, born in an era long forgotten, he had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, the birth and death of countless generations. What once was a gift had become a curse, an endless night without reprieve. Eternity had stripped him of purpose, each day blending into the next, a monotonous cycle of existence without meaning. Vincent lived in a decrepit flat in an old part of the city, his home filled with relics of the past, each item a reminder of the life he could no longer claim. He looked ancient, his face a map of wrinkles and sorrow, his body frail and bent. To the rare passer-by who noticed him, he was just a lonely old man, forgotten by time. But beneath the veneer of age lay a hunger, a thirst that could never be fully quenched. As the years dragged on, Vincent grew weary of the bloodlust that defined him. He had tried to starve himself, hoping that by denying his nature, he might find release from his eternal torment. But the hunger always returned, gnawing at his insides until he could no longer resist. Each time he fed, he felt a piece of his soul wither away, leaving him more hollow than before. One cold, foggy evening, Vincent wandered the streets, his mind plagued by thoughts of ending it all. He had seen too much, lived too long. There was nothing left for him in this world. As he stumbled through an alleyway, he collapsed against a wall, his strength failing him. The world spun around him, and he closed his eyes, wishing for the darkness to take him. But fate had other plans. A young man named Daniel, out for a late-night walk, spotted Vincent and rushed to his side. "Are you all right, sir?" Daniel asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. Vincent opened his eyes, seeing the kindness in the young man's face, and for a moment he felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in centuries: hope. "I'm fine," Vincent croaked, his voice weak and raspy. "Just tired." Daniel helped Vincent to his feet, offering his arm for support. "Let me take you home. You shouldn't be out here alone." As they walked, Vincent felt a strange warmth in Daniel's presence. It had been so long since anyone had cared about him, since he had allowed himself to care about anyone. He couldn't bring himself to push the young man away, even though he knew the danger he posed. When they reached Vincent's flat, Daniel insisted on staying until he was sure Vincent was all right. They talked for hours, Vincent sharing stories of his youth and Daniel listening with rapt attention. For the first time in centuries, Vincent felt a connection, a brief respite from his eternal loneliness. But deep down, he knew this couldn't last. His hunger was growing, and he feared what he might do. As dawn approached, Daniel finally left, promising to return the next evening. Vincent watched him go, a pang of guilt and dread settling in his chest. As the sun rose, Vincent retreated to the darkness of his home, his mind torn between the desire for companionship and the need to protect Daniel from the monster he truly was. He had found a flicker of light in his endless night, but he knew it could only end in darkness. Chapter 2. The Hunger Within. The following evening, Vincent awoke with a sense of anticipation and dread. The sun had set, and the city of London was once again cloaked in darkness. True to his word, Daniel arrived at Vincent's flat, bringing with him a warmth and vitality that Vincent had long forgotten. They spent the evening talking, Daniel sharing stories of his life and dreams, while Vincent recounted tales from his seemingly endless past. Vincent found himself laughing, a sound that felt foreign and almost painful. He realized how much he had missed the simple act of human connection, the feeling of being seen and heard. But as the night wore on, Vincent's hunger grew insistent, gnawing at his insides, with a ferocity that he could no longer ignore. He had gone too long without feeding, and the presence of Daniel, with his warm blood coursing just beneath the surface of his skin, was almost unbearable. Vincent's mind was a battlefield, torn between his need to protect Daniel and the primal urge to feed. "I should go," Daniel said eventually, sensing Vincent's growing discomfort. "You look exhausted. I'll come back tomorrow." "No," Vincent said, his voice more forceful than he intended. He saw the surprise in Daniel's eyes and softened his tone. "I mean, you don't have to. You've done more than enough." Daniel frowned, his concern evident. "I want to help you, Vincent. You're not alone." The sincerity in Daniel's voice cut through Vincent like a knife. He wanted to believe that he could keep Daniel safe, that he could control the beast within. But as Daniel stood to leave, Vincent's hunger surged, and he knew he couldn't let him go. Not like this. In a blur of motion, faster than any human could react, Vincent seized Daniel by the shoulders and sank his fangs into his neck. The taste of fresh blood, rich and warm, flooded his senses, and for a moment, all he knew was the ecstasy of feeding. But as the initial hunger ebbed, the horror of his actions crashed over him. Daniel's body went limp in his arms, and Vincent pulled back, staring in disbelief at the lifeless form before him. He had done the very thing he had sworn to avoid, the very act that had driven him to the brink of despair. The one person who had shown him kindness, who had tried to help him, was now dead by his hand. Vincent cradled Daniel's body, tears streaming down his ancient face. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." The flat was silent, the only sound Vincent's ragged breathing and the distant hum of the city outside. He had been a fool to think he could fight his nature, that he could find solace in the company of another. Eternity had robbed him of everything, and now it had taken Daniel too. As the night wore on, Vincent cleaned up the evidence of his crime, his mind numb with grief and self-loathing. He knew what he had to do. There was only one way to end this cycle of misery, one way to atone for the lives he had taken. With a heavy heart, Vincent made his decision. As the first light of dawn began to creep into the sky, he left his flat and made his way to a nearby park. He found a secluded spot, away from prying eyes, and sat down on a bench. The sun rose slowly, its rays inching closer and closer. Vincent closed his eyes, feeling the warmth on his skin, a sensation he had almost forgotten. He thought of Daniel, of the kindness he had shown, and hoped that in death he might find the peace that had eluded him in life. As the sunlight engulfed him, Vincent felt his body begin to burn. The pain was excruciating, but he welcomed it, knowing it was his penance. In his final moments, he felt a strange sense of relief, a release from the curse that had bound him for centuries. And as the sun rose higher, Vincent, the ancient vampire, was no more. His ashes scattered on the wind, a final end to an endless night. Chapter 3. The Weight of Eternity. Vincent's death did not go unnoticed. The local authorities discovered Daniel's body in Vincent's flat the next day, leading to an investigation that puzzled them greatly. There were no signs of forced entry, no indications of a struggle. It was as if Daniel had simply died in his sleep, his lifeless form untouched by violence. But the truth, known only to Vincent and now buried with his ashes, was far darker. In the weeks that followed, the flat remained empty, a silent testament to the lives lost within its walls. Daniel's friends and Emily mourned his passing, struggling to make sense of his sudden death. They spoke of his kindness, his dreams, and the mystery of the old man he had tried to help. Vincent, for all his centuries of existence, left no mark on the world, no trace of his long and tragic life. But in the quiet corners of the city, stories began to circulate. Whispers of an ancient vampire who had walked the streets of London for centuries, a creature cursed with immortality who had finally met his end. These tales were dismissed by most as fanciful legends, the stuff of horror novels and gothic folklore. Yet among the few who had known Vincent, there lingered a sense of unease, a haunting reminder of the darkness that can hide behind the most unassuming facades. For Vincent, the end had brought a release from the endless cycle of bloodlust and regret. As he faced the sun and felt his body disintegrate, he found a peace that had eluded him for so long. The memories of his past, of the lives he had taken and the love he had lost, faded into oblivion. He was free, at last, from the burden of his existence, left its mark on the world. The darkness he had carried with him seeped into the shadows, a lingering presence that could not be entirely erased. The people of London, though unaware of the true nature of the evil that had walked among them, felt an inexplicable chill in the air, a sense of foreboding that hung over the city. In the years that followed, the story of the ancient vampire became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers that lurk in the shadows and the consequences of immortality. It was a tale told in hushed tones, a ghost story to frighten children and entertain adults. But for those who had been touched by Vincent's existence, the story was all too real. Chapter 4. The Dawn of Redemption. Years turned into decades, and Vincent's story faded into the annals of London's folklore. Yet, among the cobbled streets and ancient buildings, the memory of the vampire lingered. The flat, where Vincent and Daniel had met their end, remained vacant, its walls silent witnesses to the tragedy that had unfolded within. A new tenant, a historian named Eleanor, moved into the flat, drawn by its rich history and the legends that surrounded it. She had always been fascinated by the tales of the supernatural, and Vincent's story intrigued her more than any other. As she settled into her new home, she began to delve into the past, uncovering fragments of Vincent's life through old records, diaries, and local legends. Eleanor's research led her to a small, dusty library in the heart of the city, where she discovered an old journal hidden among the stacks. The journal, written in a delicate, flowing script, appeared to be the personal account of a man named Vincent. It detailed his life, his transformation into a vampire, and the centuries of torment that followed. As she read the journal, Eleanor felt a profound sense of empathy for Vincent. His words were filled with anguish, regret, and a deep longing for redemption. She saw beyond the monster he had become, recognizing the humanity that had persisted despite his curse. Inspired by his story, Eleanor decided to honor Vincent's memory by sharing his tale with the world, hoping to bring understanding and closure to the lives he had touched. Eleanor wrote a book based on Vincent's journal, blending historical fact with the poignant, personal narrative she had uncovered. The book, titled The Eternal Night, was published to critical acclaim, capturing the imagination of readers around the world. It became a bestseller, praised for its hauntingly beautiful prose and its exploration of the human condition. Through her work, Eleanor brought Vincent's story to light, transforming the forgotten vampire into a symbol of redemption and the struggle for meaning in an endless existence. The book sparked discussions about the nature of immortality, the burden of eternal life, and the possibility of redemption, even for those who had committed unspeakable acts. In the years that followed, The Eternal Night inspired countless adaptations, from stage plays to films, each retelling Vincent's story in new and compelling ways. His tale became a part of the cultural fabric, a reminder of the complexities of the human soul and the enduring power of hope. Eleanor's work also led to the discovery of other forgotten histories, as people were inspired to look deeper into the past, uncovering the hidden lives of those who had lived in the shadows. Vincent's story, once a source of fear and mystery, became a beacon of understanding and compassion. As for Eleanor, she continued her work as a historian and writer, dedicating herself to preserving the stories of those who had been forgotten by time. She felt a deep connection to Vincent, as if his spirit guided her in her quest for truth and understanding, and in her heart, she believed that, in some way, she had helped to bring him the peace he had so desperately sought. In the end, Vincent's legacy was not one of darkness and despair, but of redemption and the enduring power of human connection. His story, once a tale of horror, became a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the possibility of finding light even in the darkest of nights. As the sun set over London, casting long shadows across the city, the memory of Vincent, the ancient vampire, lived on, no longer a monster, but a symbol of the eternal struggle for redemption and the hope that even in an endless night, dawn would eventually come.